Hey, what's going on everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Star Wars Coffee, where in today's video, we're going to be going over the full mini-series of The Rise of Kylo Ren. That's today here on Star Wars Coffee.
I have spoken.
Hello there to all of the returning subscribers, but if you're new to the channel and you're just finding Star Wars Coffee for the first time, be sure to always hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and turn on that notification bell. And don't forget to check out Star Wars Coffee on Twitter and Twitch. And don't forget to check out the official Star Wars Coffee merchandise. Links are in the description below.
Do it!
And now let's go to a galaxy far, far away.
This is the way.
What I'm going to do in today's video is go over the Rise of Kylo Ren issues 1 through 4, because we've gotten a lot of new daily coffee drinkers to the channel over the last couple of months, and some of you guys may not be aware of the Rise of Kylo Ren miniseries, so what I wanted to do is put together a video of all of my reviews of the Rise of Kylo Ren and all of the breakdowns of it, and just put it in one video so you guys can literally watch it as if you're just reading each one sequentially. So if you haven't read any of the Rise of Kylo Ren miniseries, this is definitely the video for you, and if you just want to go through it again, here it is. So without further ado, welcome to the Rise of Kylo Ren. So before we go any further, I'm going to throw out a spoiler warning for anybody who hasn't seen The Rise of Skywalker yet, or anybody who hasn't read The Rise of Kylo Ren and wants to see and or read either one of these things. So please consider this your spoiler warning. So the Rise of Kylo Ren comic is actually really good. Charles Soule writes it. He did excellent work with the Darth Vader comics as well. This Rise of Kylo Ren series is going to be a 4-issue series, so it's not going to be extra long, but it is really good, especially for the first 2 issues that we've been getting. As I just said, the first 2 issues have been out so far, and in this video we're going to be reviewing the first one. So my overall review of it before we get into the breakdown of it is, this first issue is actually really good. It sets up a lot of great things, and it really starts with the time of Luke's Jedi Temple being destroyed. We knew Luke's Jedi Temple was destroyed when we saw The Force Awakens, but in The Last Jedi, Rian Johnson gave us some more insight into that with a little bit of a flashback where Luke and Kylo Ren share their views on what happened in Kylo's fall to the dark side. And we really see Kylo's version of this, hence the Rise of Kylo Ren. So we're starting off really there. So it was a great comic, again, written by Charles Soule. I encourage all of you to go check it out. Before they get to the actual Kylo Ren arc of this comic, they start off by doing something very interesting, which actually I think will make a lot of people happy. And that is, they start off by going over a little bit of the history of the Knights of Ren to set up something for the second issue, which I won't get into in this video. But they start off with the preamble giving us some context to the Knights of Ren. And if you read the visual dictionary for the Rise of Skywalker, on the Knights of Ren page, you will know, and I've talked about this in my Knights of Ren video, that Kylo Ren was not the original leader of the Knights of Ren, and the actual original leader was named Ren, and we actually get to see him. And in the Rise of Skywalker visual dictionary, I believe they say that that might be a myth and or a legend, but it seems to be pretty concrete with Charles Soule actually penning that to the paper. So we actually have Ren as the original leader, and when we first meet Ren, he is after these 2 Force users, along with the rest of the Knights of Ren. They're already assembled. The only difference is that Kylo Ren isn't leading them, and that the original Ren is. And he kills both of the Force users who are willing to join him, and he says that not everybody is able to join them, because if everybody wanted to, it would be a little easy. Something along those lines. And so obviously this is just going to set up the arc of Kylo Ren ending up as the leader of the Knights of Ren in future issues. So the remainder of the first comic, going back to the present timeline of the time that it started with Luke's Jedi Temple collapsing, is... Okay, so now we saw that in The Last Jedi, but I feel like I need to inform you that this is obviously before The Force Awakens. So even though we actually saw this come to the big screen in The Last Jedi, just keep in mind in terms of the Star Wars timeline that this is before The Force Awakens. So, the remainder of the first comic deals with Kylo Ren and the destruction of Luke's Jedi Temple, and 3 of Luke's students coming back from some training or some mission. It doesn't really give much context into that, but they end up seeing Kylo and asking what happened. And Kylo gives his take on it, saying that Luke tried to kill him, and that this is what's happening now. Luke's temple is burning. And so Kylo Ren is ready to go, and he's trying to leave with them. And the 3 students who are remaining of Luke's Jedi Temple are attempting to reason with him and essentially decide to duel him in a lightsaber battle to prevent him from escaping and trying to reason with him. And what I got from when I was reading this is a throwback feel to the Anakin Obi-Wan Revenge of the Sith type of conversation, especially with the visuals and the dialogue. It was really well written, really well drawn. It's really good. And one of the things I liked what Charles Soule did is he's willing to let them live. Kylo Ren's willing to let these students live. And this whole time, by the way, they're referring to him as Ben. So he's willing to let them live, and all he wants to do is escape. He just wants them to let him go in peace, so that way he can just leave. And they clearly are not about that. And so they make a nice point to say that to really give more context to the ability of Kylo Ren, one of the students of Luke's Jedi Temple says that he is related to both Luke, Han, and Leia, and he's like the offspring of legends. And this really just gives a lot more credibility to the fact that Kylo Ren is so powerful and is able to outmaneuver all of them really easily. And when he does easily outmaneuver them, obviously, he then goes to Snoke, who has been speaking to Kylo Ren like Obi-Wan was able to speak to Luke during the end of A New Hope and Empire. And that's really something interesting to see in the way Charles Soule plays with that idea. Because when Luke's Jedi Temple catches on fire, Kylo Ren didn't do anything to initiate that, and he just sees it. And they really give more humanity to Kylo when he says, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. And Snoke continues to manipulate him and saying, this is all Luke's fault, essentially. And Kylo, so it's interesting to know that before this comic was released, we all thought that Kylo Ren was the one who actually destroyed Luke's temple, but it appears to be Snoke. And even though he says he didn't want this reinforces the good that's still in Kylo throughout the sequel trilogy, and it really reinforces his character arc of coming from the dark to the light. So this story opens up with Ben already with Snoke, and it's very apparent that Ben is clearly still nervous as he stutters at times when he's talking to Snoke. For example, when he's like referring to, but you were asking about the Knights of Ren. You know, Snoke says that, and Ben still stutters saying, I think I could learn from them. So clearly he's not still set in his ways. He's made this decision, but what Charles Soule did really well is he was still able to capture the conflict between Kylo even now. So he was never fully embracing the dark side to the best of his ability. That's why he had to hinge his faith in Vader's mask so much, because he clearly couldn't commit to the dark side, knowing that he wasn't meant for it. So I think at some point Kylo clearly knew all of that. And he clearly wants to make a name for himself, which I find admirable, that Kylo wants to make a name for himself, not relying on his name. He's named after Obi-Wan, which he's never even met. And they reference Solo, which I also liked. They reference Solo when he says Solo isn't even Han's real name. So when Han was going to enlist in the Imperial Academy as a pilot, he just says Han and he doesn't have a name, and takes his name and says Han Solo. So Ben clearly isn't happy to be related to all of these rebellion heroes, just because he's not going to be able to get that association for his work and his work ethic and who he is. He's always going to be introduced as, this is the son of Leia and Han Solo, 2 famous rebellion generals, or he's the nephew of Luke Skywalker, the last living Jedi, and all of this. So he wants to make a name for himself, which is partially the reason I think he sought Snoke out. Ben doesn't know who Snoke is completely either. When Ben is with Snoke and he gets a transmission from Hux, Ben asks who Hux is, and Snoke just kind of brushes it off, saying, you know, you're not the only person I talk to, all of that. And deceiving Ben, continually manipulating him into just taking this facade that Snoke is of this mentor that can help Ben realize his true potential in a way that Luke can't type of deal, which is the way Ben's been bought into this whole charade, is he just believes that Snoke's going to be able to help him in ways that Luke can't. So it's very similar to the way that Anakin kind of went with Palpatine rather than sticking with the Jedi Order, because there was this thing that he wanted to learn that he knew he couldn't learn from the Jedi. So he's going to another mentor to try and learn these things, because these are very self-centered characters during their turn before they come back to the light side, which is a great mirroring of Anakin and Ben Solo. I've always thought that they mirrored each other really well, and I really like the way that Charles Soule is able to really capture the essence of who this character of Kylo Ren is in this comics, and I can't appreciate that enough. Another reason that this is one of my favorite comics. When you analyze it like this, it's so great to see. It's a fun read, and then when you really do a deep dive into it, it just gets that much better and much more richer. And I really like the line where Snoke says he wasn't born Snoke, but he became Snoke. And this is obviously true because Snoke is Palpatine. Palpatine made Snoke, and Snoke is the second facade after Senator Palpatine, who was the first facade before his true identity of Darth Sidious. So Palpatine is really the master puppet master, which is just such an underappreciated thing about Star Wars and about the Skywalker saga, is the character of Darth Sidious and how he was able to manipulate all of these pieces for such a long amount of time. And the other thing I think is really great is Ben clearly knows that he's been thinking about this. Charles Soule, I should say, has done an excellent job portraying Ben to know that he's been thinking about who he would be if he wasn't this type of Jedi and if he could pick his own name. And Snoke has been very encouraging to this, telling him that children's thoughts are pure, they do not practice self-deception, they are who they are, which is trying to hinge on the fact of and intrude on Kylo's perception that when he thought of this must have been who he really was and not who he's been trained to be type of deal, which is just more string pulling by Palpatine in the form of Snoke, which is just really well done, actually, I think. And so now Snoke sends Kylo to go seek out the Knights of Ren. In the second half of the comic, we have that flashback to Luke seeking out Jedi lore, and he's with a character that you might remember from The Force Awakens, Lor San Tekka. He was in the opening scene. He was the one who gave Poe the information that they needed, and we knew that Lor San Tekka had an association with Luke from other mediums around the time of The Force Awakens when that was released. And we see Snoke communicating with Ben while Lor San Tekka and Luke are talking about all of this. And I just think that's a really great thing to see, is even as Ben was such a younger child, that he still had this doubt about if this is the way it should be. He kind of has that sense of, like Anakin does, where he should be able to be doing more. He should be able to fly, for instance, is what is the example that's been given in this one. And he never lets him do anything. But he's clearly still conflicted, as he's still answering, yes, Master Skywalker, so am I. He's glad he's there, because I think he really wants to be appreciated by Luke, and if Luke had given him a chance, just kind of like as if the Council had made Anakin a Jedi Master, the whole tragedy of the downfall of these characters could have been avoided. And so Luke and Lor San Tekka and Ben Solo go and find a lot of Jedi lore, and then we see the Knights of Ren come in and ambush them as Ben and Luke both sense cold at the same time, which I think is just really great, because again, it shows that Ben Solo is still Ben Solo. He's not like just deceiving Luke this whole time and playing along. He's still very conflicted, and I think Luke knows that, as the Knight of Ren here makes it very clear that he has this dark shadow too that he's going to be mentioning later on. And Luke says that all of this belongs to him because he is the last of the Jedi, which means me. I love this line. It's literally this. It goes, "This is a Jedi outpost. Everything in it belongs to the Jedi Order, which, at the moment, means me. I am the last Jedi." And I really love that line. It gives me this kind of like feeling, this glimpse of the way the dialogue was written. Back to that farm boy from Tatooine, sounds like something he would tell Lars. Kind of like the power converters thing. He would say, "But it's mine," type of deal. And I just really love the character of Luke. I think that he's such a well-written character, especially in this series so far. Ben's still clearly choosing the light over the dark, as he's clearly been talking with Snoke earlier, like 10 minutes before they got to this Jedi outpost, and he says, "This is Jedi Master Luke Skywalker, he's a legend," as the Knights of Ren brush him off as an old guy. And then Kylo Ren, not born yet, predecessor to him is the original Ren, and he's clearly an overconfident guy, and Luke demolishes these Knights of Ren while Ren cowardly watches Luke take all of them out. 7-on-1 doesn't really matter to Luke, he's going off on him. He's like, I like those odds. Taking him all on and then having Ben to look them up and see if he wants to be past his shadow, as the knight here cowardly doesn't even attempt to fight Luke, just says, yep, we'll leave. Because Luke, clearly still being with the Jedi Order, doesn't kill any of the knights. He just proves that he can take them on ridiculously easily, as he just has Ben Solo protect Lor Santeca. So while Kylo has his saber drawn, he doesn't actually get to do anything. And he says he's going to leave, and so this whole flashback point of the comic makes sense to the first half, where Luke is just trying to find out, or Ben Solo rather, is trying to find out where the Knights of Ren are. This gives the backstory to why he's trying to seek them out, and why he thinks that they can help him. Because Ren here said that he was going to look them up. And Luke actually just brushes off the fact that he says he's got the shadow too. He says, but one more thing. You said you could sense the shadow in all of us. That's right, we've all got it. But you know your apprentice does too, right? Powerful. I can feel it. Better be careful, Jedi man. And then Luke clearly brushes it off. It's time for you to leave. I think Luke knows that, and he's just trying to downplay it, because he knows that he's young. He knows that this is something that Luke went through. This is something that Anakin went through. So as far as Luke knows, this might just be something that Jedi have to go through and push past before they can really become great. And then the comic ends with Ben finding the Knights of Ren, and then mentioning the name Snoke, which gives them an in and essentially a tryout to be part of the Knights of Ren. So it opens up with the Knights of Ren at a cantina, and we have Ben Solo walking in. And this echoes an earlier point in the miniseries where Ren, the leader of the Knights of Ren, tells Ben to look them up. Ren makes the point to mention the shadow that looms over Ben, as he did when they first encountered him. And Ren also re-emphasizes the fact that many seek the Knights of Ren out and end up regretting it. And to get into the Knights of Ren, Ren tells Ben Solo that a death is required, and that finding them is just not good enough. And Ben tells Ren that he has killed a Jedi. And also, Snoke is referenced a lot in this conversation, in this dialogue between the two of them, with the word maybe also thrown in there a good amount of times. Snoke clearly has talks with the Knights of Ren, or at least just Ren, the leader of them. And Ben Solo has also had talks with Snoke, as we know from the previous comic. So these two are clearly being interwoven, and maybe even doing the same type of thing where he's bridging the connection between the two of them. Ben Solo is told to tell his story about the Jedi he killed by Ren. The comic then launches off and kicks off into the past, where Ben tells Ren he wanted to go back to the planet where they first met on his search to find them. He is followed by Luke's students from earlier in the miniseries, and then Ren cuts him off, and he wants to go even further back from there to learn who these characters are. And their names are Vo, Hennix, and Ty. These are the surviving members of Luke's Jedi Temple. Luke, when we're taken back, is shown all of them as much younger, as like more kids, and we have a much more Return of the Jedi era looking Luke, talking about the Force and really echoing Yoda's teaching and his young pupils referencing stones and Yoda did on Dagobah. So Luke is clearly a great teacher. He's clearly very wise, very, very knowledgeable in the Force. After all, he was trained by Obi-Wan and Yoda, even if it was that brief. The expanded comics and the canon of that is just more in depth and really points to how wise Luke actually is. And the more I see of Luke in canon, the more of a great character I think he is. Not even the fact that he's already one of my favorite characters. But Ben sums Vo up as having a temper issue. He sums Hennix up as being a thinker, trying to open a holocron, as he's depicted as doing. And Vo seems to be the most true to an average Jedi, in terms of like what we would have seen in a prequel trilogy. And then we go back to the battle after Ren gets the idea of who these characters are. And Ben just completely destroys all three of them, like, really without much effort. And throughout the whole time that he's doing this, he's still clearly conflicted and he can't decide if he actually wants to do this or not. So after he makes a decision to like throw one of them off a ledge, he then decides, okay, maybe I shouldn't have done that, and tries to stop it with the Force. And even with that, he still completely wrecks all of them, even with all of his uncertainty. Bo is all about trying to show up Ben, and she just gets completely whomped, and then Ben tries to save her. Ben killed Hennix, who's the thinker, and Ren can tell that he didn't want to, so he makes the comment of that. It goes back to the cantina, and Ren says, I killed a Jedi, but he says, yeah, but you didn't want to. And then Ben clearly is still very unsure about the path that he wants to take. He's still very confused. But Ren decides in the end to let them shadow him a bit, because he says that he still has the shadow and Snoke thinks highly of him, so that's not nothing. And then the funniest line in this comic is Ren just completely destroys him. Like, the actual quote is, "This kid looks like trash, an actual pile of garbage," because Ben's just not, like, he's just clearly battered and torn, so they have to get him this new outfit, so they put him in these dark clothes, which if you've watched any other reviews is usually the thumbnail style that they go with, is just that one, because there's like no text or anything on it. But that was just like the funniest line. Ren ends up letting him shadow him, but clearly this isn't like Luke's gonna be really nice to you and teach you about the Force, be very disciplined. They're just gonna be throwing these absolute like bombs at him. The kid looks like trash, an actual pile of garbage. So that's, I hope we can get more humor of that in the final comic episode, or number 4 of the Rise of Kylo Ren miniseries. This is my least favorite cover art in terms of this miniseries out of all 4 issues. I just don't really think it looks a lot like Kylo in the cover art. But it picks up with Ren interrogating these prisoners, and Ben Solo uses his mind-sifting ability that we see him using in The Force Awakens while interrogating Rey, and she sees Ahch-To. So this is the time when Ben Solo's sifting through minds. And this is Ben's first time using it here in this mini-series. So this is the first time we ever see him use it, and it works. Ren says that they can release the prisoners as Ben has gotten what they needed, and then has the Knights of Ren kill them. And Ben is shocked because he thought that they were going to release them rather than kill them. And Snoke is talking in Ben's head, saying that as a result of killing them, this was a fault in the Jedi, as it was an inability to kill is what made them break more easily and what ended up ultimately defeating them. Which was, interesting to still see Snoke talk through the head, and I'll explain why when we get a little later. And Ben is clearly still hesitant about killing people, and he listens to Ren and sees the remaining members of Luke's temple, Vo and Tai, have found him and are trying to continue their confrontation that they started with Ben. And interestingly enough, Ben asks how they found him, because I guess he's curious about that rather than just being really angry and going to kill them. Because if you take note, when Obi-Wan found Vader in 4, Vader doesn't really care how he got there. He just is ready to go. So a little interesting that Ben is still interested in things like that, because it still shows that he has a connection to these characters. So he finds Vo and Tai, and Ben says that they're the past when Ren asks who they are, and then he springs into action. And Ben finds out that Tai found him through the Force and their connection. Vo fights Ren herself and says Luke called him a wannabe, which is interesting. Vo, if you remember, is the really pompous one who thinks that she should be the best, only because she believes that she's the most talented and that Ben is just the pupil student because of who he's related to, which doesn't really help the whole inner conflict going on with Ben. And this fight between Ben and Tai is very visually similar, and also very similar in choice of dialogue that we see with Anakin and Obi-Wan in the Rise and Revenge of the Sith. And even the panel art reminds me of Mustafar. The color palette does. It's not Mustafar, obviously. There's no lava or anything. It's just kind of like a rock type of cliff ledge thing that we see, rather than just a bunch of lava, a bunch of metal poles just being melted up that they have to continue to sift through. However, at this point, Ben has officially taken the bait that Snoke has set for him and just has kind of laid out over these 4 issues, when he tells Ty that he has no choices and that the Force has tried to trap him. And he's referring to the idea that he's been trapped as Ben Solo. And little does he know that in the end it will be inescapable to escape from who he really is, just as it was for Vader as well. And Ben beats Ty. However, he does not kill him. He listens to what Ty is telling him, but before Ty is able to continue and finish his dialogue and his little monologue, Ren kills him. And Ben decides to say he's not living in the shadow anymore and that he is the shadow, and then tries to take down Ren, which is actually really interesting because Ben has his lightsaber and then he takes Ty's lightsaber behind his back using the Force and then starts attacking him. And Ben beats Ren rather easily, with the panel showing that Ren only gets in 1 point of attack really before Ben completely just wallops him into the ground. And this is when Ben realizes that he beats Ren rather easily by diving into his anger completely, and he's fully in his anger. And then we get this really, really great panel where you see Leia sense Ben, you see Snoke putting these thoughts in his head. You know, that part is from the flashback at the very top part of the panel, and then we have Leia sensing that Ben has turned, like for good. And then we see Rey sense Ben on Ahch-To in the point of The Force Awakens when she's just been left on Jakku with Unkar Plot. And we can see that from her vision as a kid. And Rey says, cold. Do you feel that too? Type of line to show and illustrate their dyad with the Force is already been linked together. So this is already a dyad. This wasn't something that happened when Snoke bridged their minds. That was just a piece of it to continue to embrace it. Because if you recall, in The Rise of Skywalker, Palpatine didn't know that they were a dyad until he was able to take it and reinvigorate himself from it and replenish his flesh as a result. So Leia and Rey sense Ben. Although Rey is just a girl on Ahch-To, we also see Palpatine in the bottom of the panel, which is excellent, orchestrating the show. So we really see it come to full circle as a trilogy, and Charles Soule did a really good job of actually trying to tie these 3 movies together in that way. And he ties them together by really showing that Palpatine is the puppet master of the entire thing. And in that panel, we see Palpatine say something that we've heard him say before, which is, yes, claim your birthright and strike him down, which is very reminiscent of the line in Return of the Jedi where strike me down, or strike your father down and take his place at my side type of thing. So Palpatine's still clearly the head of the master. And in that panel, you can see Palpatine is hooked up to his machine that we see him in on Exegol. So Palpatine's still in that state where he needs, his poor clone wasn't ready to be inhabited, and he's just sitting on that life support. So Ben ends up killing Ren, obviously, which is what we see that panel explaining that is his turning point officially to the dark side. And then he takes on Vo and kills her with the Knight of Ren's, Master Ren's lightsaber. And then the Knights of Ren realize that Ben Solo was able to kill Ren and is now their master. And this is how the comic series ends, with Kylo creating his lightsaber, taking his blue kyber crystal, putting his anger into it, putting his hate into it, and you see it put him in, he gets a cracked kyber crystal, which was very important because if you remember in The Force Awakens, the reason it's all jagged and disfigured when it comes out, it's very combustible, and the reason is because it's a cracked kyber crystal, and that's what gives it its distinct and unusual glow, and its unique and unusual type of hilt, and all of that is because it's very combustible and damaged in that way. And that is how the comic ends, with Ben Solo, now officially Kylo Ren, holding his lightsaber, because the very last line is from Palpatine speaking to Ben through the Force in his head, saying, "What is your name?" And speaking through the Force through his head is an important distinguishing factor, and it doesn't show Snoke because we know it's not Snoke now, because it's already shown us Palpatine. And the reason that it did this is because when Kylo finds Palpatine on Exegol and arrives on Exegol, you see Kylo walk through, and Palpatine is telling him, "I have been every voice you have ever heard inside your head," and that is why he's saying, "What is your name?" Through his head. It's just to reinforce that point that Palpatine has always been the ultimate puppet master through this entire comic series. And I think that overall, again, now that the comic is concluded, my overall thoughts on it is that this is a really well orchestrated story. Not a lot of Luke in it, obviously, because it's the rise of Kylo Ren, so we get Luke in a couple issues for very brief points, but it's a really, really well done comic series, and especially good at focusing on Kylo Ren. And though it's a comic and you don't get as many lines of dialogue and words as you would if it was a novel, you clearly understand why Kylo was falling to the dark side, and you can see the deceit that was placed upon him and orchestrated with him, just like it was with Anakin in the prequel trilogy. And I think it's just really well done, so I highly encourage you guys to go check it out. Thank you guys for watching. May God bless you, and the Force be with you. If you enjoyed this episode, and frankly, even if you didn't, don't forget to subscribe.
Do it!
And if you want to help spread the word, please give this video a thumbs up and tell your friends to subscribe. Please check out the official Star Wars Coffee merchandise, and don't forget to check out all of the content playlists on this channel, including The Rise of Skywalker, The Mandalorian, and much more.